A D.C. police officer who was beaten, repeatedly electrocuted by the pro-Trump mob that day, January 6, 4 months ago today, in fact, is condemning elected officials who continue to downplay the attack. Writing in an open letter, he says, quote, "I struggle daily with the emotional anxiety of having survived such a traumatic event, but I also struggle with the anxiety of hearing those who continue to downplay the events of that day and those who would ignore them altogether with their lack of acknowledgement. The indifference shown to my colleagues and I is a disgrace." Joining me now to discuss, Democratic Congressman Mike Quigley of Illinois sits on the Intelligence Committee. Congressman, thanks for taking the time this morning.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
It's 4 months since January 6th, since hundreds of pro-Trump supporters violently assaulted the Capitol, injured many, including police officers. There is still no commission to investigate why this happened and how to prevent the next one. Who's to blame?
Look, I think Speaker Pelosi has been willing to compromise to get a 9/11 type commission going. I mean, 9/11 commission actually accomplished great things to keep us safe. I think the same could be said for what a January 6th commission could do. I don't know exactly why they don't want this commission to go forward, except it probably would have results that don't comport to the continuation of the big lie.
This is the problem here, though, right? Can you have a viable commission to investigate something that a significant portion of the Republican Party, sitting lawmakers, will not publicly acknowledge? Right? We had a reporter on in the last hour saying that the person who's going to challenge Liz Cheney for her seat denies that it was pro-Trump supporters even in that crowd that assaulted the Capitol. Can you have a commission when the big lie lives?
I think if you set it up the right way, you can do this. If it's a nonpartisan commission of bringing in experts and outsiders to establish the research that has to take place, the investigation that has to take place. But look, I don't know that I can ever change their hearts and their minds. I do think the majority of the American people will trust and believe the work it can do. But I think it might be a generation of Republican leadership that is lost and has sold out democracy for the rest of their time here.
There's a particular Republican involved in this. That is the House GOP leader, Kevin McCarthy. CNN's special correspondent Jamie Gangale has reporting that McCarthy is, quote, very concerned that a bipartisan commission would force him to testify about his call to Trump, pleading with him to call off his supporters. Should he testify under oath?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he is part of this. He's not a neutral observer. This was his role in the entire process. He was reportedly on the phone with the president during the course of the day. And let's not forget his remarks afterwards. I think that's part of his resistance. I think he said that a lot of the accountability lies at the feet of the current president, President Trump. He doesn't want his supporters to be reminded of this. Give them time. They'll deny that this thing ever existed, that this ever happened. There will be deniers that take place. Not just that these were not Trump people doing this, but none of this really happened or it was exaggerated, which is a disservice to the American people, our democracy, and particularly to the officers we lost and who were injured that you mentioned before.
The sad fact is that perpetuating that lie, or at least refusing to call it out, has become a loyalty test in the Republican Party. It's a large reason why Liz Cheney, likely on the way out from her leadership position, perhaps from her seat. You speak with your GOP colleagues. Do they honestly believe the election was stolen and it wasn't Trump supporters who assaulted the Capitol? Or are they just too afraid to publicly contradict the president?
I've been here during the Russian investigation, 2 impeachment investigations, and the answer to your question is similar on all counts. It's a little bit from column A and a little bit from column B. A lot of the profiles and courage we saw previously were with those who were leaving. Now we're seeing those who showed the courage to vote for impeachment, not work against an elected process on the Electoral College that day, but they're being forced out or censored by their own party. And we're still stuck with the fact that 55% of Republican voters still believe that these weren't Trump people storming the Capitol.
It's remarkable. I do want to ask you about another threat, and that is these almost sci-fi-like but very real energy attacks on U.S. personnel overseas. They began in Cuba, and there's now evidence of them taking place in Europe, and discussion of a possible attack along these lines of an NSC staffer on the White House grounds here in this country. They cause, as you know, enormous problems, pain, etc. Do we know who's behind these attacks?
You know, I'm not in the position to talk about attribution. I do think it's absolutely critical to protect the State Department, the intelligence community, those that could be, have been and will be vulnerable to such attacks. First, we have to state they are real. We have to take care of those who have been injured. We have to protect those who are out serving for us, not just foreign, obviously, but obviously now on a domestic basis. I think you can imagine the usual suspects capable of doing something like this, but for now, it's best to focus on protecting and taking care of those who have been injured.
But how can you protect? How can you protect? I mean, is this country protecting its personnel, both overseas and possibly here on the U.S. homeland, if you're not publicly calling out who you believe is behind this?
I think your point is well taken. At this point in time, it is a subject in discussion how to do both of those things. And I think you can do both right now, but a public attribution would not be particularly helpful. We will address this, and we have been addressing this once the Biden administration took office. But it is a very real concern. We will get to public attribution soon.
Final question. The commission to investigate January 6th appears to be floundering, but money to implement new security changes, as recommended by a commission led by retired General Russell Honore, seems like there's building support. Should we expect agreement on that in Congress to, for instance, hire the hundreds of additional Capitol Police as recommended?
You know, when I look back to the letter you just referenced from a police officer, you know, they are owed apologies. They are owed our eternal gratitude. Being in the room where it happened, I know I am whole because of their heroism and their loss. So I think we owe beyond that gratitude that we pass a security supplemental. I do believe it will move next week, and I do believe it'll pass sometime this month. Sitting in that chamber those days, I think most of us could figure out what we need to do for our police. They needed more police. They need to be better equipped, better paid. They needed a supplemental emergency fast response force, including the National Guard, to be there, and retractable fencing. Coordination, communication, intelligence, you know, we owe it to them, and we're hoping that they don't leave en masse because morale is so low.
Well, we'll see if that vote moves forward next week. Congressman Mike Quigley, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back.